I caught my wife cheating and tore apart her lover's marriage in the process. I was completely lost and didn't know what to do next. There had been signs, but I brushed them off. I was blinded by love and never in a million years thought that could happen to me, especially not with her. She was my wife and my best friend of nearly 2 decades. I worked in another city and wasn't supposed to be home until that night. We had plans to head out on a 2-day trip the next day. Work had been quiet, so I decided to come home early the previous afternoon. That trip was supposed to give us some much-needed alone time after a summer packed full of family and friends. When I pulled into the driveway, there was a truck parked there I didn't recognize. Not long ago, a neighbor had asked how I liked the new truck, but I figured he was mistaken and let it slide. The second I saw that truck, though, I felt this horrible pit in my stomach. I had loved my wife and trusted her completely, but that feeling just wouldn't let go. I crept around to our bedroom window. It was open. As I got closer, I heard them. I peeked inside, and there they were sitting on our bed. I walked away, fighting the urge to do something I'd regret. Thinking about what would happen next had left me spinning. I drove to our family cabin and drank whatever I could find. All night. The next morning, I thought about going home to confront her, but changed my mind. I wasn't ready. All I felt was anger. I knew I wasn't in the right frame of mind to see her face to face. So, I went back to the cabin. I had a bottle of rum staring me down, and I'd been looking at it for the past hour. I wanted to drink until I forgot that mess, but I was scared I'd lose control and make things worse. I realized that was a crossroads for me, and whatever I did in the next few days would shape the rest of my life. That's why I was there. I needed help, but I wasn't ready to talk to family or friends. That day, I felt a lot better. The pain had mostly faded. I still felt like I had been sucker punched, but I was starting to look ahead. It had only been 2 days, so it felt strange, like the calm before the storm. Or maybe I was just more resilient than I thought. A few clarifications. We didn't have kids, though we had been planning to start trying soon. We had recently sold our house and were getting ready to move closer to my work. The new owners were about to take over. As for my neighbor, I planned to thank him quietly, just like he dropped those hints. A lot of people asked about the signs I mentioned. Here were a few that came to mind. She had started texting late at night, which wasn't like her. She began meeting up with friends after work more often. I was glad she was being more social, so I didn't think much of it. She also had this weekly yoga class, but apparently she hadn't been paying for it. One of the instructors was a co-worker, and she helped with setup and cleanup. I remember thinking she didn't seem flexible enough to be doing that much yoga. Then there were the calls from unknown numbers that hung up when I answered. We usually picked up each other's phones if one of us wasn't around, so that felt odd. We got a lot of spam calls, but these weren't telemarketers. Just hang-ups. When my brother came by, we had a long, serious talk. He had always been my real best friend. I realized I needed to keep that in mind. No matter what, he had always been there for me without judgment, just like I had been for him. He was a reminder of what true friendship looked like, even when we butted heads sometimes. Since I was supposed to be home that night, I decided to text my wife. At work, we weren't allowed to use phones, so she knew I could only sneak in a message or two. I told her I had to visit one of the company's remote sites and wouldn't be able to call until the weekend was over. I also said I'd cancel our reservations and rebook later. She suggested taking her best friend to the romantic winery hotel we had booked. But I knew she wasn't talking about the friend she wanted me to believe. I told her I had already given the reservation to my brother and his wife since it was non-refundable. They promised to pay me back the next month. That morning, I canceled everything except the romantic suite. My brother was coming with me. Thankfully, the hotel let us switch the honeymoon suite to a room with twin beds. There was a beautiful lake nearby and some boats for rent. Maybe we try to fish or just drift around for a while. My brother and I had been planning for some time that I'd have a free weekend, and now I didn't need to text or talk to her for a few days. It eased some of the stress and gave me more time to think. At that point, I was leaning heavily toward divorce. Honestly, I couldn't see another way out. My brother supported me, but suggested taking a couple of weeks to pause and consult someone. His wife knew a family counselor willing to talk to me on Monday. I doubted it would change my mind, but at the very least, it might help untangle the mess in my head. I also took the advice of my bro and started consulting with lawyers, just to prepare for what I felt was inevitable. I wanted to handle everything properly. I had never thought of her as someone who would try to deceive me, but she cheated, so I felt I needed to be ready for anything. I planned to make the most of the weekend. A lot happened over the past few days. I'll start with the less important details. My brother Matt and I drove nearly 5 hours to the Vineyard Hotel. I deeply appreciated his company during that time. It felt more like a heartfelt conversation that really helped clear my head. After complaining for most of the drive, I decided I wanted some alone time, and he went out for dinner. I stayed in the room, and he brought me back some food. The next day, he managed to rent a boat. On Saturday, we went fishing. The hotel owner knew about our plans and kindly packed a small cooler with food and drinks for us. It was their way of making the romantic package useful for two brothers. It was a nice gesture. The fishing didn't go well. We both caught a couple of trout, but had to let them go because they were too small. The snacks from the hotel saved the day. We wrapped up fishing by noon and spent the afternoon driving to wineries and fruit stands, buying food and crates of wine for Matt's wife, Jen. That evening, we found the biggest tomahawk steak we could and grilled it. On Sunday, we drove back to Matt's house. He lives about an hour from me. When we arrived, Jen was there, and we opened a chilled bottle of white wine. That marked the official end of the weekend for me. Jen told me that while we were away, she decided to keep an eye on my wife. She said that the man had been at my house Friday night and stayed until Saturday morning. Jen managed to drive by just as he was leaving. She followed him to his apartment and found out where he lived. My wife stayed at his place Saturday night. The same night, she was texting me, professing her love and saying she missed me. Jen spent half her time visiting family in my town and the other half keeping tabs on my wife. She mentioned that she accidentally caught my wife leaving his apartment Sunday morning and snapped a few photos of them hugging and kissing before getting in her car. I didn't want to see the pictures. That was the final straw for me. I didn't think I could ever trust her again. If she could switch so easily, saying she loved me while being with another man, I couldn't envision any future for us. Still, I decided not to make any rash decisions driven by emotion. I needed to stay calm and level-headed. That's when Jen mentioned that Sharon would be coming to dinner. Sharon was the counselor Jen found for me. For clarity, she had never met my wife. This was my first time meeting her. Sharon turned out to be a very pleasant person, and we got along well. After dinner, Sharon and I took a walk around Matt's neighborhood to walk the dogs and talk privately. Sharon was incredibly helpful because she listened without judgment and made me feel like I didn't have to constantly keep my guard up. It felt therapeutic. As much as I'm comfortable with my brother, this felt different. I really needed it. Our walk lasted about an hour, and the only real piece of advice Sharon gave me was not to delay talking to my wife. She said the longer I waited, the harder it would be to have that conversation. She pointed out that the most important thing for me right now was clarity, and my wife was the only one who could give me that. Later that night, Jen and Matt offered to let me stay with them for as long as I needed. I knew Matt and I both had limits when it came to living together long term, so I spoke with my boss, who arranged for me to stay at company housing. I had stayed there every other week before, but weekends weren't typically allowed. He made sure I could stay for a few months if necessary. I decided to schedule another meeting with Sharon that week because I found our walk to be incredibly helpful for a first session. She agreed. Sunday night, I spent time lying in bed thinking about how to approach that conversation. It was tough because even the imagined scenarios in my head made me angry and sad. I decided to wing it. I usually handle pressure well. Yesterday, I woke up, said goodbye to Matt and Jen, and drove home. On the drive, I kept wondering what I'd do if he was there when I arrived. I realized that would probably push me back into that angry state I had been stuck in days earlier. I decided to drive by the house first. Neither his truck nor my wife's car was there. I went inside and gathered the things I couldn't part with, mainly photos and old family heirlooms. I packed everything into my car and headed toward his apartment. Her car wasn't there, but his truck was. I decided to text her to ask where she was. She replied, saying she was grocery shopping. I trusted her so little at that point that I drove by the store to confirm she was actually there. I hate admitting it, but my trust was shattered, and that felt like the only way to be sure of anything. I texted her again and told her to come home because we needed to talk. She asked what was wrong. I simply told her to be ready for an honest conversation and turned off my phone. She got home about 15 minutes later. When she walked in, she leaned in to hug and kissed me like she always did. I pulled away. She asked again what was wrong. That's when I told her it was time to start being honest with me. She acted like she had no idea what I was talking about. I told her, "Fine, if you can't be honest, then I'm leaving." She started to panic and said, "Are you talking about yoga?" I felt like we were finally getting somewhere, so I asked her what she meant. That's when she admitted she hadn't been going to yoga. Here's the short version of the rest of the conversation. "If you weren't going to yoga, then where were you going?" "I was just walking to clear my head. I've been really anxious lately." "Why have you been anxious? And why did you lie about it?" "The move has been stressing me out. I didn't know how to tell you." "So, you decided to lie? Why couldn't you just tell me you were going on walks to relax?" "I didn't want to lie. I was scared my stress would add to yours." "I'm not stressed. I feel like you're not telling me everything." "What do you mean?" "I think you're lying about more than just missing yoga. Be honest." "You lied to me again. This isn't going to work." "I don't know what else to say." "Are you talking about last weekend when you said you went out for drinks with friends and came home late? Did that really happen? Or was that a lie too?" "I did go out for drinks that night, but no, I wasn't with my best friend like I said." "Who were you with?" "No one. I drank alone." "You're drinking alone now?" "Yes. Maybe I have a problem. We can talk about it later." "This is your last chance. Be honest, or I'm leaving." "I don't know what else to say." "Fine, I'm leaving." At that moment, I stood up and left. Usually when we fought, I'd drive around to cool off. She probably thought this was one of those times, but she realized differently when she saw I had packed my clothes, toiletries, and Xbox. That's when she started calling repeatedly. I told her I had given her a chance to be honest, and she didn't take it. There was nothing left to say. She begged me to come home and talk in person, claiming she had no idea why I was so upset or what she had done. She kept repeating that she loved me and would never hurt me. Hearing those words stung. They cut deeper than I thought possible. I used to believe them without question. Now, they felt like a dull, jagged knife tearing through me. I couldn't take it, so I hung up. She called about 40 more times before I was ready to pick up again. When I finally answered, she asked, "Did you talk to Karen?" "Her best friend." I asked why she wanted to know. She said, "Come home. I don't want to talk about this over the phone." I agreed. I drove around for a while longer to calm down before heading back. The conversation went like this. "I take it you talked to Karen?" "No. A few weeks ago, while you were at work, we went out for drinks. A couple of guys started buying us drinks, and we just played along. When we were leaving, one of them tried to kiss me. I pulled away immediately and told him I was married. I felt awful about it. I wanted to tell you, but I was stupid and decided to hide it. Karen was close with one of the guys and, without asking me, gave his friend my number. He's texted me a few times since, but I never responded. Can I see your phone?" She showed me her phone, and it was completely empty. Only messages from me and her mom remained. She never deletes her messages, so this was something new. I checked her photos, and they were clean too. But then I looked in the deleted folder and found a picture of a man I didn't recognize. "Who is this?" "That's the guy who tried to kiss me." "Why did you take his picture?" "Just stupidity." "That's not a reason." "Why did you take his picture?" "I don't know." "Is that all you're going to tell me? Or is there something else?" "That's all I can remember." I left again. I didn't want her to keep feeding me pieces of the truth. I got in my truck and drove off. She ran outside, trying to stop me, but I was already gone. I drove to a nearby park, sat on the tailgate of my truck, ate my lunch, and tried to figure out what to do next. As I sat there, more memories started surfacing, moments I should have paid closer attention to. Like that one time I worked a weekend shift and went to bed early. My wife went to a club with some friends. I woke up at 4 a.m., but she still wasn't home. I called her several times, but she didn't pick up. About half an hour later, she called back and asked me to pick her up. When I got there, she said they had been trying to catch a cab but couldn't. Then, a couple of guys that her friend knew offered them a ride, but wanted to stop by their place first. When they got there, her married friend went into a room with one of the guys. My wife said she looked for her for a while, but eventually gave up and drank in the kitchen with their housemates while she waited. She claimed she didn't hear her phone when I tried calling. We argued about it, and she expressed disgust at her friend's actions, saying she would cut ties with her. I thought that was the end of it. Another time, she went to visit a friend in another city for a planned girls' night. 4 of them were supposed to drink and watch movies in their pajamas. At least, that's what she told me. She called me around 1 a.m. to say goodnight. We talked for about 20 minutes, and she kept repeating how much fun they were having. But then I heard a man's voice in the background. I asked who it was. At first, she denied hearing anything, but then it happened again, louder. She couldn't deny it and said, "Oh yeah, X brought a couple of guys over. Everyone's really annoyed by it." She was drunk and 3 hours away, so I had no choice but to trust her. We argued again because she hadn't told me they weren't alone. She promised never to put herself in that situation again. Clearly, that promise was a lie. After remembering all of that, I decided to give her one last chance. I turned my phone back on, and it rang almost immediately. I answered. She was crying and begging me to come home. I drove back. When I walked in, she rushed to me, sobbing. She sat on the couch, rocking back and forth, repeating, I'm sorry. What are you apologizing for?" I asked. She rocked like that for 5 minutes before she could catch her breath and start talking. She admitted, "I lied about that guy who tried to kiss me." "All right, tell me what really happened." The 4 of us actually went back to his place that night. We were messing around. I knew it was more than just messing around, but even hearing that made my head spin. It felt like the room was shrinking, and it was as if millions of voices were shouting in my ears. I think I had a panic attack. I went to the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face, and tried to steady myself. "What did you do? Do you really want me to tell you?" "Yes." He used his fingers, and I used my mouth. "Is that all?" "Yes. I'm not playing games. Either you tell me everything right now, or this is the last time we speak." She broke down in tears again. After a few minutes, she managed to speak. We met up again and was close. "I'm so sorry. I love you. I'll do anything to fix this. It only happened once. Please, if I tell you the truth, give me a chance to make it right. I'll think about it. It was an affair. We were seeing each other while you were away for work. It lasted for almost a month." Then she added, "He's married. They're getting a divorce. Does he know you're married?" "Yes." "If he's cheating because his marriage is falling apart, do you think that means ours is too? Is that what you told him?" "No. I don't think our marriage is over. I'm such an idiot. I hate myself. Please don't leave me. I can fix this. I'll do anything you want. If you were in my place, or even his wife's, what would you want to make things right?" "To know the truth. To know I could trust him." "Can I trust you?" "I messed up, but I won't anymore. If you were his wife, would you want to know the truth?" "Yes." "Then fix it. Do you want me to call her?" "If you think that's what she deserves." She tried calling but didn't get an answer. A few minutes later, her phone rang. The number came up as Karen from work, but she looked shocked. I knew it wasn't Karen. "Is that him?" I asked. She nodded. "Yes." I took the phone and answered. "Oh, I think I dialed the wrong number," he said nervously. "No, you didn't. This is the husband of the woman you've been close with. She's got something to tell you." I handed the phone to my wife. I listened as she told him everything. "It's over between us. It was just a fling. Don't ever contact me again." Before she hung up, I took the phone. "Which divorce lawyer are you hiring?" "Because I'm filing for divorce." "Oh, didn't you tell my wife you were getting divorced?" "No." "All right then. Can I talk to your wife? I think she deserves to know about this as much as I do." "Please, man, I didn't know she was married." "Don't ruin my marriage over a mistake," he begged. "You ruined mine over a mistake. It's only fair I tell your wife." "Please don't. She's at work right now. I'll tell her when she gets home. I swear." "Fine. Make sure you do," I said and hung up. I asked my wife if she knew where his wife worked and what her name was. She did. I told her to call and ask for her. She managed to get through and asked her to sit down. The woman said she was just about to leave and would call my wife back from her car. A few minutes later, she did. "What's going on? Is something wrong with him?" she asked. "No, he's fine. I just need to tell you something awful, and I don't want you driving. Please don't get behind the wheel." "Oh God, what is it?" "I've been having an affair with your husband for the past month. I'm confessing everything to my husband right now, and I thought you deserved to know as well." There was silence for almost a minute before she finally said, "If this is some sick joke, I'll find out who you are." Then she hung up. Not even 10 minutes later, my wife got a text from Karen from work. It said, "Thanks, you just ruined my life." I grabbed the phone and replied, "You ruined 4 lives and 2 marriages. Don't forget that this is your fault, not mine." For the next hour, my wife begged me to stay. She suggested couples therapy, promised never to leave my side, and even offered intimacy. I expected all of it, thanks to the advice I received from others. Then she said we should take that vacation, her treat. "We need time alone," she explained. "We need to reconnect because your work schedule pulled us apart." It was exactly what I thought she'd say. What she didn't expect was for me to tell her I had already taken that vacation. She also didn't expect me to say I had started therapy on my own. And she certainly didn't expect to hear that I caught her with her lover in our bed. I don't think she realized I already had a place to stay. When I told her everything, she collapsed to the floor, sobbing. She said she didn't deserve to live, insisted she was too terrible to be with anyone. This went on for a while. I stayed for about 4 hours, listening to her excuses, her pleas, and her attempts to get close to me, even physically. Eventually, I called Karen and told her that her friend, my wife, was in a terrible state and needed someone to watch over her. Then I left. It's been nearly a month since then. I haven't spoken to her since. She's been calling and texting me constantly. Her friends and family have reached out too, each with their own take or plea for sympathy. Her father was the only one who told me to do what was best for me and said he would always love me like a son, no matter what happened. Tomorrow, I have another session with Sharon, my therapist. On Thursday, I'm meeting with my lawyer. I think I know where this is headed, but I won't be sure until it happens. Sorry for the long story. Writing this out helps me process everything. Thank you all again for the support. Hearing from others who've gone through similar experiences really helps me feel less alone and gives me hope for the future. I'm truly grateful to each of you. Please feel free to share your thoughts on all of this.